Hello, I'm Nathan P. Butler, author of a Saga on home video and host of From the Star Wars Home Video Library here on YouTube, and this is Star Wars Home Video Year by Year. This time we take a look at 1988, which is not a big year for Star Wars Home Video on the US market. There is one noteworthy item, and it does mark the beginning of what we will see as a trend in the future, but not much to speak of in the US. There are, however, some foreign releases that we'll be taking a look at that do have a little bit more impact. For context, not a lot going on with Star Wars beyond home video either, although I would note that this is the year that Willow hit theaters, and of course, there's that April Fool's Day joke that sort of folded into the Star Wars universe, and there are quite a few Star Wars home video collectors who do collect Willow as well as part of their Star Wars home video collection because of that tangential connection. Recall that A New Hope hit home video in 1982, Empire in 84, Jedi in 86, and yet, in 86 and 87, there was no way to actually purchase a set of all three. Yeah, you could buy bundles and stuff like that at stores, but an actual official set that is produced as a set to be sold? Not so much. That waited until 1988 for our first boxed set. Oh, wait, nope. We still can't even get a boxed set in 88. Instead, that'll have to wait a couple of years in the US. We get a weird banded set, you might say, in the US in 1988. Rather than putting out a box set in 1988, what we saw was the current releases of A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi in their current packaging with a little holographic dot on the back in this case, just put together with a little paper wrap, making it actually very hard to find these days. So the plastic wrap here is just the names of the film. It says Star Wars Trilogy. We'll see that causing issues later. But if you take the little slip piece off, it's just the ones we've already seen, just with the little holographic dot in the corner, which is also the case for some of the individual releases of the time. So nothing really fancy. I would note at least that they did come with a cool little card that talked about the trilogy and sort of advertised the stuff and did have some cool trivia on the back. But otherwise, yeah, nothing to write home about aside from the little paper band that most people just threw away. So it's very difficult to find one of these intact these days. But it was the first time you could buy the original trilogy together in the US as a package. This will cause issues later, though, because that Star Wars Trilogy name, just like how all this packaging, like this A New Hope, that would have been made in 88, that would have been from the iteration that hit home video in 86, that was in packaging designed pretty much, minus the digitally mastered part, like the packaging in 84, would still have frickin' 1984 as a copyright date on the back, because that's when the packaging was designed. Just like that would cause confusion, so would the Star Wars Trilogy name. When we do finally get box sets starting in 1990, many will refer to those box sets from 1990 when trying to list them for sale these days as coming from 1988. Why? Because the Star Wars Trilogy label is copyrighted to 1988 when it was given the name for this branding here. There's still going to be some confusion for a little while. But that's really it for noteworthy Star Wars releases in 1988. It's just the first time we can buy stuff officially together. But other markets had cooler stuff going on. Sticking with the live-action films, we saw a set released in the UK called The All-Time Greats. Right, so you had All-Time Great Movies for the first sell-through copy the previous year, All-Time Greats for CBS Fox Video for just a reissue of the trilogy. That in and of itself, not terribly noteworthy. What's noteworthy was what was released alongside it. I only have one of these three to show you because they are insanely, insanely rare these days. And that is that the UK started putting out Star Wars just this time on a format that really didn't get a lot of traction in the US and got no releases for Star Wars in the US, known as Video8. Little teeny tiny cassettes about the size of an audio cassette back then, but the kind of format that in the US was more popular for use in camcorders for recording. Other markets tended to do much more with them with pre-recorded movies. The US did have some, like we had all the Indiana Jones stuff over here, for example. But this little teeny tiny cassette format got a trilogy release in the UK in 1988. I would say that there are two formats that are the single most rare to find Star Wars stuff on today on the secondary market. One is Video 2000 / V2000 / VCC that we have seen before, and we're actually going to see briefly here in a minute for something that is tangentially related to Star Wars. The single most rare, Video 8 for any retail releases. But the UK did get an all-time greats Video 8 version to go alongside the all-time greats VHS version in 1988. We will see more coming from Japan in a future episode. Speaking of the UK, they got their first release of Ewoks The Battle for Endor on VHS. But notice, whereas Caravan of Courage came through CBS Fox Video, Battle for Endor was coming through MGM UA Home Video, which is the company we would see then go through in the US in 1990. And uniquely, this is one of the few times with a Star Wars release from any region that we've seen where it's actually a reversible cover for it. So you can actually take this out, flip it around, and have that white cover instead of this black cover. I keep the black cover showing because it matches the other future reissues of this from the UK to keep them all together. And it wasn't just the UK getting it. We saw releases. This, in particular, is a beta release. Yes, in 1988, still a beta release over from Japan of Battle for Endor, but most noteworthy, as we have seen similar releases recently, we have a Japanese LaserDisc release of Battle for Endor as well to round it out with Caravan of Courage that we saw recently. But again, notice, just like in the UK, different distributor, MGM UA, has entered the chat, so to speak. Beyond that Video 8 release, probably the coolest thing we saw in 1988 was coming out of the UK as well, and that is that the UK started pushing out Droids and Ewoks on home video. We're going to see in the United States that that won't happen until 1990 initially, and the offerings will be pretty sparse. We're nowhere near having a full set in the US. They don't have a full set from the UK on VHS either, but they're close, missing just one episode per season of each show for Droids and Ewoks. So the UK got Droids Volume 1, The Battle Against Sice From, Volume 2, The Pirates and the Prince, and Volume 3, Uncharted Space. And then, of course, that was the first season. It is missing Kobe and the Star Hunters, the one sort of bridging episode here. But of course, when watching it on television, we did have the first season, and then there was that TV special, The Great Heap. The Great Heap got its own VHS release in the UK as well. And UK dairy company, Dairyly, did a special promotion for a single episode release, which was Tale of the Rune Comets. Unfortunately, they didn't take the opportunity here of saying, oh, we're missing one episode out of the season? We're going to do a special promotion with one episode? Let's do the missing episode. That would be smart. No, they just reused an episode that we already had on one of the others, leaving Kobe and the Star Hunters still out there lost in space, so to speak. Perhaps uncharted space. Not to be outdone, the UK also got a run of Ewoks on VHS, though still missing one episode per season. Season 1 is missing the episode The Three Lessons. Now, Season 2 had a lot of episodes where they were divided into 2 stories instead of just one, though it did vary. The episode with 2 stories called Prowbeaten and Baga's Rival, those are the episodes, or the one episode, and those are the 2 stories that were left out of the UK run for Season 2. But the UK for Season 1 got Ewoks Volume 1, Morag's Revenge, Volume 2, The Goopans and the Jindas, and Volume 3, Wicket the Hero. You would note, perhaps in watching these, if you were to watch these, that the episodes are completely out of order. They're more thematically collected than chronologically collected. Then for Season 2, which is god-awful, we have Ewoks Volume 4, Wicket's Adventures as he becomes a warrior, also as he becomes a teenage punk-ass little son of a... God, I hate the characterization of Wicket. Really, and Tebow and Latara. Everybody but Nisa sucks in Season 2. They changed the characters dramatically. Anyway. Then we have Volume 5, which is Wicket's Adventures. So you have Wicket's Adventures as he becomes a warrior, and then Wicket's Adventures. Very creatively named there. And then finally, Volume 6, which actually does have some connection to the Empire for the first time. The Battle for the Planet Endor. And Dairyly also did a single episode release, just repeating one we saw elsewhere, which is Night of the Stranger, which they call Night of the Strangers instead of The Night of the Stranger, whatever, on that individual mail-away release. So the UK may not have got a full run of Droids or Ewoks, still missing one episode per season, but it's a heck of a lot better than we got over here. On a tangential note to Star Wars, I mentioned last time that 1987 was when Spaceballs hit movie theaters, and how Star Wars collectors do tend to also collect Spaceballs oftentimes, and there are going to be some releases just released over and over and over and over and over again, usually just the same disc. We'll look at Spaceballs only twice, once when that disc is released so we can see how it gets released over and over again for years, and in its initial release. And in its initial release, it hits in 1988, where you have a VHS release and a LaserDisc release in the US. And for collectors out there looking for something really obscure in an oddball format, we have this German release, which is, oh my goodness, Video 2000. Yes, Video 2000 did still exist in 1988, at least in some markets. So we're getting close here to actually seeing US releases of at least parts of Droids and Ewoks, the Ewok telemovies, a box set for the original trilogy, all those coming in 1990. Before we get there, we need to check out one more year. So join us next time as we check out 1989.